Okay, so I've got a lot to share with you here, so strap in. This is the culmination of 10 years of pondering. My name is Wes, Irish, if you haven't guessed. From a southeast coast in Wexford, small town. People where I'm from leave school at about 12 years of age, and that was normal back then in Ireland. It was pre-Celtic Tiger, pre all that good stuff that we never really got our hands on. I was thankfully one of the last generation to be physically and mentally beaten by the Christian Brothers in what they were trying to call a school system at the time, and even being a creative in that system as well um, was worse. Brother Gibson made me kneel on two Bibles one day because he caught me writing poetry in a free class. So the fact that I'm standing here talking to you now is a bit mad. So where I am today is I'm the program leader for the media production course here at John Moore's. Just submitted my doctorate thesis, which was insane thing to do. And it's been a bit of a mad journey, and that journey is part of the inspiration of the thesis and where I want to go with this. And it was actually a local man, Ken Robinson, who would be one of my education heroes, who actually inspired me onto this. I lied in London and said I was a student to get into this conference. I'd never heard of a conference before. It was £1,000 a ticket or something. So I was there with an ACDC t-shirt at Mohawk, surrounded by all these suits, smelling of aftershave for 2 days. Whilst people like Noam Chomsky, the best job title I ever heard was the president of Lego was there. And there was a guy who was a cosmologist at the end who what he said really stuck with me. He made a joke about this universe is going to collide with this galaxy is going to collide with another galaxy in 9,000 years. So don't say you weren't warned. But what he said as well as a personal observation he had when he went into cathedrals is that people at those times when they were building those cathedrals, everyone lived within a 5 mile radius, and at that time they thought the universe was only 1,000 years old and it would only last another 1,000. But even at that, they did their part of the cathedral as best they could, even though they knew they wouldn't see the cathedral finished. That really stuck with me. So for about 2 days after this conference, I tried to digest all this information I got from all these people. What's my part of the cathedral? Well, I accidentally ended up in a creative course in Dublin that wasn't looking at UCAS points. It looked at portfolio and interviewed us. And when I got onto that, it completely changed my life. It really did. It transformed me. It still does. I even got an opportunity to go to Shanghai in May with students. So when I was in that space, what's my corner of the cathedral? Well, I'm not going to change the world with a song anymore. I gave up on that one. But media and media education is my corner. So what can I do about that? I want to get back into teaching. So maybe I can help some students from backgrounds like me to get onto this journey. To do that in the UK, you need a doctorate. Well, what the feck is that? And then I started to find out what that was. At the time, I'm working in ESPN Disney in London, trawling through night shifts to get onto this journey. Which happened, and it was a part-time Ed D in Bournemouth that then got me my first job. I was into that a year before I got my first teaching job in Solent, and that's where I did the sample for this research. The reason I'm showing you that picture of that desk, some of the feedback sometimes in the thesis stage was, why is transformative learning important? The day that I took that photograph, I got a message from my mom that my cousin Trevor was found dead. He had overdosed, and Trevor, bless him, didn't do well for a long time after his dad passed away. I was sitting in that Gladstone's library. It was something that John Moore's had set up. It would cost Trevor a month's dole to be in that place for 1 or 2 nights. Why the hell was I there for a week? Not costing me a penny. And the reason is that education gave me different chances that Trevor never had. So that's why it's important. What did I do with this? The word transformative kept coming up everywhere. So you're trying to find, this whole framework thing. And there's a lot of jump off points within the thesis that I'm trying to kind of condense quickly here for you. But transformative kept coming up. And when I looked at it, there was actually a research thing to hang this onto called transformative learning theory. When I ask people how they're quantifying this, and this is part of what I'm passionate about now, Mark, I've embarrassed Mark a few times asking him, how are you defining transformation and transformative, and he can't answer me. So he's having to give me a meeting to talk about I can. And we shouldn't just throw it around as a thing. It's important. I mean, even I was looking at the master's fees now are 9 grand as well, for 1 year. So are you actually leaving people in a better state that we picked them up in that year? And are we actually looking at all of the things that you can get value from it instead of just saying it as a thing? So here's where it gets a bit messy. My way in was transformative learning theory. I got lost in it. I call it philosophical overload. I was reading paper after paper after paper and getting absolutely nowhere. I had nothing to bring back into the classroom, and that led me to try and derive utility from all of this. But that's easy to say now, by the way. It took me 10 years to get here. Because I was reading stuff and I thought I was stupid. I thought I wasn't getting it. But it turns out later on that some of it is weasel wording and not very useful at all. And then things change over time. So what I did was I went all the way back to the guy who started transformative learning theory, a guy called Jack Mezirow. In the 70s, he did a study across America after noticing that his wife had changed a lot. Well, had opportunities changed, at least is the way I see it. I don't think the women changed at all. I think they always had potential, but now that they've been in school, society treated them differently, which is the harder part to prove what I'm talking about. So out of that whole research, it was a big project they did, and he had 10 phases of perspective transformation. So that's what I went back to. It's messy up here now with transformative learning. So I went all the way back. If I'm supposed to be an expert in the thing eventually, I might as well start at the start. So there's 10 phases, but he'd done 3 iterations of it over the years. So I decided to go back and explore that. Okay, so how do I do this? Being from the creative industries, I knew I wanted to use video because the idea for me was if I interview students every 2 or 3 months, they're going to be further away from any moment that I might consider as a transformative or perspective transformation. We all have devices, we all have phones, so maybe I can get them into a space and coach them to upload things when they've realized them, right? Now, coming from there's a method strand inside of the thesis as well, which is this is very interesting versus what might be called a serial interview. There's a type of thing where you get a team of people in a documentary. You set up a nice lamp against a nice flower in a nice window at a nice time, and you get a certain type of thing back. Some of these clips are at 2 a.m. Some of them are at 3 a.m. Eddie, bless him, did a 45-minute rant one night at 4 in the morning about this project that was due. Which is a bit mad at the start, but it led to some really mad insights, some great insights, because I started pattern matching this stuff within NVivo using reflexive thematic analysis to get me through the data. It was one of those things I thought I was already doing the first 2 things, and I came across Braun and Clark's work, and it actually kind of evolved with me to the point where it added reflexive, which was great. It was enabling for me because when you're trying to put your own story into this, people are hammering you with autoethnography, and all this kind of other stuff that it really wasn't fitting. But with Braun and Clark now, with their work up as far as 2022, it really is just enabling us to put our story into it. And it's nice to see that today with some of the talks, because education is a personal thing. And when I was reading transformative learning theory papers, there was all these people who were behaving as if they had arrived on the planet as professors. It had never happened to them, and even the ones who were positive about transformative learning, they still weren't talking about any of it had happened to them as well, So through this coding, I was going to open up my laptop and show you, but I kind of went a bit insane with this over the years. So I didn't just do code things to one of Mezirow's 10 phases. I did all of them. And then in my own research questions as well, I wanted to see what other things were coming out of it. So if I was running through NVivo now, it's all nice and tidy, by the way, which is great, because my first iteration for this, my data familiarization in that section in NVivo just says I had a notebook. So as clips came in, I took some notes and I would feedback next week. So I would upload a clip to my students on a Sunday, and then they would reply whenever they wanted to. A bit nerve-wracking. But then you're sitting in a boring meeting and you get a ping on your phone and you've just done some research. So it was great that way, And there was a point in that as well, because early on in your doctorate, you feel like there's all these things you can't do. So I changed the tone. I wasn't asking questions anymore. I started to share my experiences, and that gave back a different kind of data. So coded the Mezirow stuff within an inch of its life. And then 5 years later, I caught up with the students again. So it's longitudinal. I interviewed the students after they graduated, and it was very interesting, the points of correlation. So things like presenting while they're at university, group work at university, they hated it. And then after 5 years later, the things that they said stuck to them the most, group work and presenting, down as far as dealing with builders and stuff on sites, So where does it all go? I'm speeding through this. I used to give out very early on that it was impossible because a doctorate, that conversation, that contribution to knowledge felt impossible to me. It was a weird thing. I felt like I had to have an E equals MC squared. But the full sentence is a contribution to a conversation of knowledge in your area. Nobody told me that at the start. So if you're in a doctorate journey, don't stress, you don't have to invent anything. Ironically, I did find and come up with two things. So in the literature, there was a guy called Keegan, and he said in a phrase in one of his papers, he said, "What form transforms?" So I really held on to that. And one day at Gladstone's again, I was having a Lucozade and packet of crisps at the back, and I finally stood up after pondering this question since 2017, actually. And I landed on this. So I need things to be simple, right? So this is the institution level system that I've come up with, and I've got one for individuals as well. So it's a frame of reference model for education design. In relation to creative industries, education design and delivery, there are three key transformation frames of reference to consider: the social frame, the learning frame, and the career frame. Looking through these frames, there are three key transformation or perspective development bands: journey, position, and options with supports. So in the bands is an important identifier because it recognizes that we have bandwidth. That's what it looks like on the page. Now it's deceptively simple until you start working through it, and it needs to be. So I did an exercise within my thesis to try and see from my position as a program leader what kind of stuff will come out of it. So where I have the reflexive thematic analysis themes, that could be a meeting with your team. It could be some feedback from students. It could be an anonymous online survey or something. But even just workshopping that myself from a program leader position. So in the social journey, supports and understanding at home came up a lot as a code. Something in D&D is development and design awareness. Parents' experiences might result in lack of home encouragement, academic achievement isolation, subject isolation, assessment supports. So what can we do about that? Then you have a suggestions column where you start talking about things like induction and returns agenda, add personal tutor stuff. So if you think about what Scott was saying earlier on, if we really sit down and consider the social journey of the cohort we have now, in an anonymous survey, things like criminal engagement, that kind of stuff might come up. So then we have to workshop it now and be aware of it. So again, deceptively simple. I think it's only like it's 100 words, 10 years of work to 100 words, which was crazy. But actually, there's a lot to it when you start trying to figure it out. What I want to do next is I don't want to do this to sit in a paper. I want to try and develop it to an open source piece of software that we can all contribute to across institutes. So if you have this issue or that issue, these are some of the solutions we come up with. Going back to this stuff then, Mezirow's phases were very problematic. There was things like religion, guilt, shame, all that good Christian brother triggering stuff was in there, which is a barrier to things. So when I tested it all, some of it was too old. You can even tell in the basic coding here. So turning to religion only got 2 references attached to it, but actually those 2 references are the PDFs of Mezirow's work itself. There's actually nobody spoke in terms of that or feeling guilty or shame about education, which is nice because I would have had a lot. So where I ended up then with that one is I had a second eureka moment, which is really contradicting the first half of my thesis. So I had to delete all that stuff where I was giving out about the pressures to have an invention. And I come up with this. So there was negative connotations in Mezirow of why people start on a transformative journey. So that's gone. And I've borrowed from the creative industries in terms of script writing. So your journey starts with an inciting incident and it runs all the way through different points of reflection and building forward for students. It's designed for creative students, but it can work for anyone, I think. And if I was opening up my laptop and showing you, I've got 2 extra columns in terms of mindset and outputs for that as well. What I propose in my thesis is to start talking about TranZed, so going back into transformative learning theory, but to branch out with a focus on utility and how we can actually bring stuff back into the classroom with it, So that's where I am. Okay. Thanks for listening. Questions? I was busy.
You mentioned Ken Robinson. So did you incorporate any of because on the theme of creativity, obviously he's dead now, but he was one of the kind of the gurus of kind of creativity.
Yeah, I think one of the main things he's done is encourage me to be here, isn't it? So and even in that respect, he did influence this. And I remember I shook his hand once at a different talk he was giving, And I told him about the Christian Brothers, and he said, he gave me, well, you know, then, and I took that kind of nod and gesture to do something about it. But one of the things that he talked about was, and it's a problem I'm always trying to solve, is how do you give, if you're in a room of 60 students, because in Bournemouth I had 120 students per level, which is too much, way too much. But how do you give them an individual experience? And I think something like a personal transformation system that the student can engage with along the program and revisit many times. I'd like to turn this into an app, actually.
Yeah.
So it's this is me trying to figure out, how do I give you an individual experience whilst you're one of 60 or 30 or 120?
Well, that's